The sterile white of the ultrasound room felt colder than usual. For Audrey Davenport, this was supposed to be a pinnacle of joy, the first time she and her husband Harrison would see the fluttering heartbeat of their child together. But the leather seat beside her was empty. The pity in the technician's eyes was a mirror to the dread coiling in her stomach. An hour ago, a text message had shattered the dream. Urgent crisis at Montgomery Global. Can't break away. Terribly sorry, my love. But Audrey knew. In the silent humming room holding her own hand, she knew this wasn't about business. This was a different kind of betrayal, one she wouldn't let stand. The silence in the Bentley was more oppressive than any argument. Audrey stared out at the rain-slicked streets of New York City, the blur of yellow cabs and designer storefronts, a meaningless backdrop to the storm raging inside her. The ultrasound photo tucked into her purse felt like a lead weight. Their baby, a life they had planned, celebrated, and announced to their circle of affluent friends with champagne and curated smiles. Now it felt like her baby, a solitary journey she was already beginning to navigate alone. Harrison Montgomery was not just a husband. He was an institution. The CEO of Montgomery Global Capital, his face was a regular feature in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. He moved in a world of 9-figure deals, private jets, and boardroom battles that shifted markets. When he'd swept Audrey, a promising young architect, off her feet, it had felt like a fairy tale. He was charming, brilliant, and devastatingly attentive. He loved her vision, her independence, he'd said. He didn't want a trophy wife. He wanted a partner. For 5 years she had believed him. She'd given up her burgeoning career to manage their estates, oversee their philanthropic foundation, and create the perfect, serene home he claimed he needed to escape the pressures of his world. Their Manhattan townhouse, a 6-story limestone marvel overlooking Central Park, was her masterpiece of design and comfort. But lately, it had begun to feel less like a home and more like a beautifully decorated cage. The urgent crises had become more frequent. Late nights at the office, last-minute trips to Zurich or Hong Kong, whispered phone calls he'd take on the terrace, his back turned to her. Audrey wasn't naive. She was an architect. She understood structure, and the structure of their marriage was showing hairline fractures, the kind that precede a catastrophic collapse. Back in the cavernous silence of the townhouse, she walked past the staff, their averted eyes and quiet greetings, another layer of her isolation. In the master suite, a space larger than her first apartment, she sank onto the silk-covered chaise lounge. She pulled out her laptop. Her hands didn't tremble. The heartbreak of the last few hours was crystallizing not into tears, but into a cold, hard resolve. Harrison was meticulous, almost pathologically so, in his business life. He believed in redundancy and backups, in having access to everything everywhere. To that end, they had a shared cloud server, where scans of all important documents were kept, from passports to corporate filings. He'd insisted she have access a testament to their partnership. It was a detail he would come to regret. She typed in her password. The excuse was the crisis at work. She would find the board minutes or the deal documents related to this sudden emergency. A small vindictive part of her wanted to see if his excuse held even a shred of truth. She scrolled through the folders: MGC board resolutions, Geneva acquisition, personal finances. It was in the latter that she found it, a subfolder labeled discretionary accounts. Inside was a litany of Amex statements for a black card she didn't know existed. The charges were a roadmap of a secret life. dinners for two at Perse and Daniel on nights he was supposedly working late, a recurring charge for a private suite at the Carlisle Hotel, jewelry purchases from Cartier and Harry Winston, pieces she had never seen. And then the anchor that dragged her entire world under a monthly wire transfer, a staggering $50,000 every month for the last 18 months. It was sent to a shell corporation, Orchid Holdings, LLC. A quick search of the shell corporation's public records was all it took. The registered agent was a high-powered law firm known for creating anonymous entities for the ultra-wealthy. But a deeper dive using property databases she still had access to from her architecture days linked Orchid Holdings, LLC, to a single asset, a penthouse apartment. Not just any penthouse. It was in the new ultra-exclusive One Highgarden tower, a needle of glass and steel piercing the Tribeca skyline. Her blood ran cold. One Highgarden was the talk of the town, a building so exclusive that residents were rumored to have their own private elevators that opened directly into their apartments, ensuring complete anonymity. The perfect place to hide a secret. The final piece of the puzzle slotted into place with a sickening click. One of the Amex statements had a charge from a high-end floral boutique. Audrey clicked on the digital receipt. A dozen long-stemmed white orchids, the flower she despised, finding them clinical and cold, sent to the One Highgarden penthouse. The delivery name on the order, Sloane Harrison. Sloane. The name tasted like ash in her mouth. She remembered her, now a junior analyst at a rival firm Harrison's company had acquired 2 years ago. Young, ambitious, with sharp eyes, and a smile that never quite reached them. Harrison had mentioned her once, praising her aggressive instincts. It seemed those instincts weren't limited to the trading floor. The phone on the nightstand buzzed. It was Harrison. She stared at it, the screen illuminating his handsome, smiling face from their last trip to St. Bart's. She let it go to voicemail. A moment later, a text appeared. "Just seeing this. Voice message left. Call me back. This deal is a monster. I feel terrible, Audrey. I'll make it up to you, I promise." The lie was so bald, so insulting, it didn't even sting. It clarified. He wasn't just cheating. He was building a parallel life funded by their joint future, while she was at home building a nursery. The sheer scale of the deception was breathtaking. The penthouse, the monthly stipend that amounted to more than most people's annual salaries. The shared name. It was a grotesque parody of the life he had with her. Audrey stood up and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle against the bruised purple of the twilight sky. The man she had married did not exist. In his place was a stranger, a man who could leave his pregnant wife in a doctor's office to be with another woman, and then lie about it with the casual ease of ordering a coffee. The pain was a physical thing, a crushing weight on her chest. But beneath it, a different feeling was taking root. It wasn't sadness. It was rage, a pure, undiluted fury that burned away the fog of grief. He had mistaken her quiet nature for weakness. He had mistaken her love for unconditional acceptance. He was about to learn that an architect knows more than just how to build. She also knows exactly where the load-bearing walls are and what it takes to bring the whole structure crashing down. The first call she made wasn't to him. It was to the most feared divorce attorney in New York City. Beatrice Shaw's office was the antithesis of Harrison's world. There was no polished chrome or abstract art. It was old money, old power. Walls lined with leather-bound legal books, a faint scent of paper and Earl Grey tea in the air, and a mahogany desk that looked like it had witnessed a century of New York's most scandalous secrets. Beatrice herself was in her late 60s, with shrewd, intelligent eyes and a reputation for dismantling powerful men with surgical precision. He didn't show up to the ultrasound. Audrey said, her voice steady. She had refused the tea and sat ramrod straight in the client chair. He claimed it was a business emergency. Beatrice listened without interruption, her fingers steepled. She didn't offer platitudes or condolences. She listened for facts, for leverage. Audrey laid it all out, the separate black card, the Shell Corporation, Orchid Holdings, LLC, the $50,000 monthly payments, the One Highgarden penthouse, and the name Sloane Harrison. She had printed everything, organizing it into a neat folder that she now pushed across the desk. Beatrice opened the folder and reviewed the documents. Her expression remained impassive, but Audrey saw a flicker of something in her eyes, the keen interest of a predator catching a scent. 18 months, Beatrice murmured, tapping a perfectly manicured nail on the wire transfer statement. This isn't a fling, Mrs. Montgomery. This is a shadow family. The stipend, the dedicated residence. He's established her. In legal terms, this is what we call flaunted and notorious. Good for our purposes. What are my purposes? Audrey asked the question hanging in the quiet room. That depends, Beatrice replied, leaning back. What do you want? Do you want to burn him to the ground? Do you want to teach him a lesson and reconcile? Or do you want to quietly and cleanly sever this marriage, taking everything you are entitled to? And then Audrey thought of the empty seat in the ultrasound room. She thought of the casual, insulting lie in his text message. She thought of her abandoned career, the years dedicated to his comfort, his image. I want to be free of him, she said, the words feeling more true than anything she'd said in years. But I will not be the one who walks away with nothing but scars. He built an empire on lies. I want to make sure my child and I are secure, no matter what happens to him or his company. And I want him to understand what he has lost. Beatrice nodded slowly. Security is paramount. Revenge is a bonus, but it can cloud judgment. We will focus on the former, and in doing so we will likely achieve the latter. The first rule is silence. You do not confront him. You do not cry. You do not give him any indication that you know. From this moment on, you are the loving, supportive, slightly naive wife. Can you do that? Audrey, who had spent the last 5 years playing a part, nodded. I can. Good, Beatrice said. Because while you play your part, we will be working in the background. My team will do a full asset search. Not just the declared assets, but the hidden ones. The offshore accounts, the private equity holdings disguised as company investments. Men like your husband, men with this level of arrogance, they always have secrets beyond the affair. The affair is just the loose thread. We pull on it, and his entire tapestry of deceit will unravel. Beatrice explained the strategy. They would hire a forensic accounting team, the best in the business. They would also engage a private investigator, not just to document Harrison's comings and goings with Sloane, but to dig into Sloane herself. Who is she? Beatrice mused, looking at the name on the floral receipt. Is she just a young opportunist, or is she something more? A 20-something analyst doesn't just land a millionaire and a $50,000 a month stipend without a certain skill set. We need to know what leverage she has on him, if any. Over the next few days, Audrey lived in a state of suspended reality. She returned Harrison's call, feigning sleepy disappointment. Oh, honey, I was so sad you weren't there. But I understand. I hope you closed the deal. We're still in the thick of it. He'd lied, his voice smooth and convincing. It's a real beast. I saw your message. Is everything okay? With the baby? Everything is perfect, she said, the word a shard of glass in her throat. A strong heartbeat. I have a picture for you when you get home. That night, he came home late, carrying a ridiculously large bouquet of peonies, her favorite. He was playing the part of the contrite husband, kissing her forehead, placing a hand on her still flat stomach, his eyes full of what she now recognized as manufactured sincerity. I'm so sorry, Audrey. I promise I will never miss another appointment, he'd said. She smiled and handed him the ultrasound photo. He looked at it, his face a mask of paternal awe. Incredible, he whispered. It was a masterful performance. 2 hours earlier, the private investigator Beatrice had hired a discreet man named Peterson, had sent her a photo. It was of Harrison and Sloane laughing as they left a restaurant in Tribeca, just a few blocks from her penthouse. While Harrison slept, Audrey was awake, communicating with her team. The forensic accountants were already finding discrepancies. Millions of dollars funneled from Montgomery Global into a series of shell companies, far beyond what was needed for Sloane's upkeep. It hinted at a much larger problem. Was he hiding money from the company's investors, or from her in anticipation of a divorce? Peterson, the PI, was also proving his worth. He'd discovered Sloane Harrison wasn't her real name. She was born Sabrina Hatcher from a working-class town in Ohio. She had legally changed her name 6 months after the acquisition of her firm by Montgomery Global. It was a calculated predatory move. She hadn't just fallen into an affair. She had rebranded herself to become his mistress. Peterson also had a source inside the One Highgarden building, a disgruntled doorman who confirmed Harrison Montgomery was a frequent, almost daily visitor. He never used the front entrance, always the private garage, taking the service elevator to the sub-level, and then a private lift directly to the penthouse. A ghost in the building. The plan was solidifying. Beatrice wanted to wait to gather an irrefutable mountain of evidence before making a move. They would have proof of financial fraud, which would give them immense leverage in the divorce settlement. The infidelity was the moral wound. The financial crimes were the legal kill shot. Audrey played her part to perfection. She discussed nursery colors with Harrison. She let him rest his head on her lap while he complained about the stress of his deal. She felt nothing. It was like watching a movie of her own life. Inside, she was a different person. She was a CEO of a one-person corporation whose sole mission was the systematic dismantling of Harrison Montgomery. She was an architect, and she was drafting the blueprints of his ruin. The foundation was laid. The demolition was scheduled. All she had to do was wait for the right moment to press the detonator. The night it all shattered began just like any other night in their gilded cage. It was exactly 1 week after the missed ultrasound. Harrison was on the phone, pacing the length of their enormous living room, the city lights a glittering tapestry behind him. He was using his boardroom voice, a low, urgent tone that conveyed immense pressure and importance. "No, Arthur, you don't seem to understand," he snapped into his phone. "This isn't a negotiation. The exposure is untenable. Liquidate the position by morning. I don't care what the loss is. Contain it. Do you understand me? Contain it." He hung up and ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair. His shoulders tense. He looked over at Audrey, who was curled on the sofa pretending to read a book on prenatal nutrition. "Everything all right, honey?" she asked, her voice the perfect blend of concern and deference. "Just a fire at work," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "A fund in Singapore went sideways. Nothing I can't handle." He forced a smile. "How are my two favorite people doing?" He walked over and kissed her, his hand resting on her stomach. The gesture which once would have made her melt now felt like a violation. She had to fight the urge to flinch. Peterson's report from that afternoon was open on her tablet, hidden beneath the e-book. It contained photos of Harrison and Sloane, leaving a spa looking relaxed and intimate. The fire at work was a world away. "We're fine," she said, smiling back. "Just relaxing." He told her he needed to run to the office to personally oversee the crisis in the Singapore fund. It was another lie so routine now it was almost boring. She knew from Peterson that Sloane had a reservation at a new, impossible-to-get-into speakeasy downtown. "Of course, darling. Don't work too late," she said, kissing his cheek. "Be safe." The moment the door closed behind him, Audrey's facade dropped. She picked up her tablet and tracked his car, a black Escalade, not heading towards his midtown office, but straight downtown towards Tribeca, towards One Highgarden. A wave of cold fury washed over her, but it was familiar now. A companion. Beatrice's voice echoed in her head. Silence. Wait. Let him incriminate himself further. She settled in for the wait, a silent vigil in her silent house. She made herself a cup of chamomile tea, the warmth of the mug doing little to soothe the ice in her veins. She communicated with Peterson via a secure messaging app. "Audrey. He's on his way to you. Said he was going to the office. Peterson confirmed. Escalade just pulled into the private garage at One Highgarden. He's on the move." For the next 2 hours, Audrey sat in the deepening twilight, the book forgotten in her lap. She imagined them up there in the penthouse she was paying for with her future. Were they laughing at her? Did Sloane ask about the baby? The thought was a fresh stab of pain. This was the hardest part of the plan. The waiting, the knowing, the powerlessness of it all. And then something unexpected happened. Her secure phone buzzed. It was Peterson. "Peterson. Something's happening. This is not on the itinerary. Audrey." "What is it?" "Peterson security is converging on the penthouse level, not hotel security. These guys look like professionals. Black suits, earpieces. Very serious. Audrey." "Whose men?" "Not yours." "Peterson." "Absolutely not." "I'm watching from my post across the street. There are 2 men at the service elevator and 2 more at her private entrance. They just let a man in a suit carrying a briefcase into the lobby. He's going up." Audrey's heart started to pound. This wasn't part of the plan. Beatrice's strategy was one of quiet intelligence gathering, not overt action. Who would be sending a team of men to Sloane's apartment? Peterson stand by. "The doorman is lighting up my phone. He says the man with the briefcase is a lawyer. He's serving an immediate eviction notice, and he has movers with him. They're on standby in the loading bay." Audrey stared at the message, her mind racing. An eviction. Tonight. But why? And who had ordered it? It couldn't be her. She and Beatrice had explicitly decided against any action that could tip Harrison off. Audrey. Whose lawyer? On what grounds? Peterson. The eviction is for breach of contract. The doorman said the lease is held by Orchid Holdings, LLC. The lawyer is from the firm that represents Montgomery Global. The world tilted. Harrison's lawyer. Harrison was evicting his own mistress. Peterson. She's coming out. They're escorting her out. She's yelling. Can't make out what she's saying. She has nothing with her but her purse. They are not letting her back in. The movers are going up now. They're boxing up the entire apartment. A picture came through a moment later. It was Sloane standing on the curb under the harsh streetlights, looking frantic and furious. Her perfect hair was disheveled, and she was screaming into her phone. A black car, not Harrison's, pulled up, and two of the men in suits flanked her, gesturing for her to get in. She refused, throwing her phone onto the pavement where it shattered. One of the men picked her up, not violently, but with an unnerving efficiency, and deposited her into the back of the car before it sped off into the night. Audrey felt a dizzying sense of vertigo. What was happening? This was Harrison's play. But it made no sense. Why would he detonate his own secret life tonight of all nights, the night he'd skipped their ultrasound? Was this some bizarre, twisted attempt to fix things, to get rid of the evidence and come crawling back to her? The timing was too specific, too brutal. He had left his pregnant wife, gone to his mistress, and then had her forcibly thrown out onto the street. This wasn't remorse. This was damage control. But the damage he was controlling for seemed far greater than just an affair. An hour later, the front door opened. Harrison walked in looking pale and shaken. He had loosened his tie, and his face was etched with a deep exhaustion that for the first time looked genuine. He saw her on the sofa, and his composure cracked for a second. He looked like a man who had just walked away from a car crash. "Audrey," he said, his voice raspy. "You're still up." "I was worried," she said, and for once it was the truth. She was worried, but not for him. She was worried because the game had changed. The board had been flipped, and she no longer understood the rules. He sank down beside her, burying his face in his hands. "It's been the night from hell." "The Singapore fund?" she asked, testing him. He looked up, his eyes haunted. "Yes." "And other things. Complications." He took her hands, his grip cold and tight. "Audrey, there's something I have to tell you. I haven't been honest with you about the pressure I've been under. About everything." She braced herself. Was this it? The confession. The tearful admission of the affair, edited for his own absolution, now that the evidence had been conveniently disposed of. "I've made some mistakes," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "Mistakes that have put this family at risk. I've been reckless." Audrey waited her silence, a blank canvas onto which he could paint his lies. But as he spoke, she realized this wasn't about the affair. It was about something much bigger, and the eviction of Sloane Harrison wasn't the end of the story. It was the explosive beginning of a new, more dangerous one. "I had an affair." The words, when they finally came, landed in the quiet room with all the force of a controlled demolition. Harrison delivered them with his head bowed, his voice a carefully modulated whisper of shame. He was performing contrition, but Audrey, armed with the knowledge of the evening's brutal events, saw it for what it was, a calculated gambit. He was trying to get ahead of the story, to frame the narrative in a way that made him a flawed man, who'd made a terrible mistake rather than a sociopath who had just had his mistress professionally erased from her life. Audrey remained silent, letting him fill the void. This was Beatrice's core instruction. Let him talk. Liars will always reveal more than they intend. It was with a woman from work. He continued, still not looking at her. "It's over. It was a mistake, a symptom of the stress I've been under. It meant nothing, Audrey. You and this baby. You are my life." He finally risked a glance at her, his eyes pleading. He was expecting tears, recriminations, perhaps even a slap. He was prepared for a domestic drama. He was not prepared for her response. "Her name is Sloane Harrison," Audrey said, her voice devoid of emotion. Or rather, Sabrina Hatcher from Dayton, Ohio. "The penthouse at One Highgarden, which you leased through Orchid Holdings, LLC, must have been lovely. Was the $50,000 a month stipend enough for her? Or did the Cartier shopping sprees come out of a different slush fund?" Harrison recoiled, as if she had physically struck him. The color drained from his face, leaving a pasty gray pallor. The mask of the penitent husband fell away, revealing the raw shock of a master manipulator who had just been checkmated. "How?" He stammered, his voice barely audible. "You're a brilliant man, Harrison," she said, standing up and walking to the bar to pour herself a glass of water. Her hand was perfectly steady. "But your arrogance is a fatal flaw. You assumed I was just the supportive wife tending to the home fires. You forgot I'm an architect. I see the blueprint. I see the rot in the foundation." He stared at her, speechless. He was off balance, his carefully rehearsed confession rendered useless. Audrey pressed her advantage. "So let's stop playing games," she said, turning to face him. "You didn't end things with Sloane tonight out of a sudden attack of conscience an hour after leaving her spa day. You had her evicted, forcibly. I know you sent your corporate lawyers. I know you had a team of security remove her. So tell me, Harrison, why? Why the scorched earth tactic? What are you so afraid of that you had to silence her in the most dramatic way possible? Cornered and exposed, Harrison's demeanor shifted. The shock gave way to a desperate, pragmatic fear. He got up and began to pace the hunter, now caged. "You don't understand," he said, running his hands through his hair. "It wasn't just an affair. It was complicated. Complicated for me, Audrey," demanded her voice like ice. He finally stopped pacing and looked at her, his eyes wild with a panic that went far beyond infidelity. She was blackmailing me. Audrey felt a jolt, but her expression remained unchanged. This was the twist she had been waiting for, the reason for the night's bizarre events. "Blackmailing you over what?" The affair, she asked, knowing the answer was no. The affair was his leverage against her, not the other way around. He shook his head, letting out a harsh, bitter laugh. "God, I wish. No, not about the affair. About the company." He collapsed onto the sofa, the fight gone out of him. "Montgomery Global is in trouble, Audrey. Serious trouble. For the last 2 years, we've been hiding losses from a series of catastrophic investments in Asia. I cooked the books. We created off-balance sheet entities to hide the debt and inflate our earnings reports. It was supposed to be a temporary fix, a way to ride out the storm without spooking the investors and the board. The confession hung in the air, thick and toxic. This was the secret the forensic accountants had been sniffing around: financial fraud on a massive scale. And Sloane Audrey prompted. She knew, Harrison whispered. When we acquired her firm, she was a junior analyst, but she's brilliant. Ruthless. She figured it out. She pieced together the transfers, the shell companies. She didn't confront me to expose me. She confronted me to profit from it. The affair, it was her way in. She became my confidant, my secret keeper. The penthouse, the money, it was all hush money. It was the price of her silence. Audrey finally understood the perverse logic. Sloane hadn't been a simple mistress. She had been a co-conspirator, a parasite who had attached herself to Harrison's sinking ship, intent on gorging herself before it went under. "So what happened tonight?" Audrey asked. "The whole thing is about to collapse," he said, his voice cracking. "A federal audit is imminent. Someone from inside must have tipped them off. I couldn't risk Sloane being subpoenaed. I couldn't risk her cutting a deal with the SEC to save herself. She had copies of documents, server logs, proof of everything. I had to get them back. The eviction wasn't just about removing her. It was a pretext to get my security team inside that apartment to retrieve every piece of data she had. We have her laptop, her phones, her hard drives." He looked at Audrey, his expression a desperate plea for an alliance. "I did it to protect us, Audrey. To protect this family. Everything I have, everything we have, is tied up in Montgomery Global. If it goes down, we lose everything. The houses, the money, the foundation, all of it. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I was trying to save our future. It was a masterful pivot. He was attempting to reframe his monstrous actions, the lies, the cheating, the fraud, as the misguided efforts of a family man trying to protect his legacy. He was trying to make her a co-conspirator in his cover-up, binding her to him through mutual interest in his survival. For a moment, a flicker of the old Audrey, the woman who loved him, felt a pang of pity for the broken man in front of her. He looked so defeated, so utterly destroyed. But then she remembered the cold ultrasound room. She remembered the pity in the technician's eyes. She remembered the chillingly efficient way Sloane had been disposed of, like human garbage. Harrison wasn't trying to save their family. He was trying to save himself. He had sacrificed Sloane to the fire, and now he was asking Audrey to help him rebuild his kingdom on her ashes. She looked at him, the man she once promised to love in sickness and in health, and felt nothing but contempt. He hadn't just underestimated her intelligence. He had fundamentally misunderstood her character. "You didn't do this for us, Harrison," she said, her voice quiet, but ringing with finality. "You did this for you, and you have no idea the trouble you're really in." Harrison stared at her confusion, clouding his desperate features. "What are you talking about?" "I told you everything. The danger is the federal audit. The danger was Sloane." "The danger, Harrison, is that you are a fool," Audrey replied. She walked over to the bookshelf, which appeared to be nothing more than a beautifully curated collection of art books and first editions. She pressed a discreet button, and a section of the shelving swung inward, revealing a small hidden safe. She entered a code and removed a slim black hard drive. She held it up. "You seem to be under the impression that your team was successful tonight, that you retrieved all the evidence from Sloane's apartment." A new, more profound dread dawned on Harrison's face. "What is that?" "This," Audrey said, "is a complete mirror-imaged copy of every file Sloane Harrison had on you and Montgomery Global, and more." The blood drained from Harrison's face. He looked at the hard drive as if it were a venomous snake. "That's impossible. How my investigator, Mr. Peterson, is a very resourceful man," Audrey explained calmly. "While your goons were playing Secret Service and manhandling Sloane onto the street, he was having a very productive conversation with her. Turns out, being publicly humiliated and tossed aside by your millionaire benefactor makes you very eager to talk, especially when a calm, professional man offers you a secure car, a burner phone, and a direct line. To a lawyer who doesn't work for the man who just ruined you." She let the reality of his strategic blunder sink in. He had focused so intently on seizing Sloane's physical hardware that he never considered the most obvious contingency a cloud backup. Sloane is no fool either. Audrey continued. She knew you'd turn on her eventually. She had a dead man's switch, a constantly updated encrypted backup of all her files stored on a secure offshore server. The moment she was detained tonight, she sent a one-word text to a trusted third party. Go. That single word gave Mr. Peterson's cybersecurity contact the password to access and download everything. Audrey placed the hard drive on the marble coffee table between them. It sat there small and innocuous, containing the power to obliterate his entire world. So while you were busy shredding documents and congratulating yourself on your brilliant damage control, my attorney was receiving a treasure trove of evidence. Evidence of your affair, which establishes motive. Evidence of the monthly payments, which establishes a pattern. And the crown jewels, irrefutable proof of securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Enough to send you to federal prison for a very, very long time. Harrison looked as though he couldn't breathe. The carefully constructed walls of his reality were not just cracking. They had been pulverized. He had been playing checkers while she was playing three-dimensional chess. Why, Audrey? He finally whispered, his voice broken. Why would you do this to destroy me, to destroy the father of your child? A bitter, humorless smile touched Audrey's lips. Destroy you, no. You did that halt all on your own. I'm doing what you claimed to be doing. I am protecting my family. My family, which consists of me and this baby. She walked back to the hidden safe and removed a thick, leather-bound folder. She placed it on the coffee table next to the hard drive. This is a post-nuptial agreement drafted by my attorney, Beatrice Shaw. I'm sure you're familiar with her work. It supersedes our original prenuptial agreement, citing your gross misconduct and criminal activities as grounds for a complete renegotiation. She opened the folder. Here are the terms. They are not negotiable. The townhouse is to be transferred into a trust for our child, with me as the sole trustee. A second trust will be established also for our child, funded with $150 million in liquid assets. This money must be clean, transferred from accounts that my forensic accountants have already vetted and cleared of any connection to your fraudulent activities. Luckily for you, your personal investment portfolio, the one you started before this mess, is substantial enough to cover it. She paused, letting him absorb the sheer scale of her demands. You will cede full, sole, legal and physical custody of our child to me. Your name will be on the birth certificate, but your parental rights will be terminated. You will have no say in their upbringing, their education, or their life. You will become a biological fact, not a father. Finally, she said, her voice dropping to a steely whisper. You will sign this confession. It details the extent of the fraud at Montgomery Global. It names your co-conspirators. It is a full accounting of your crimes. Harrison stared at her in utter disbelief. You want me to sign my own death warrant? They'll crucify me. Why would I ever agree to this? Because of what I'm going to do with this hard drive, Audrey said, tapping the black plastic casing. If you sign everything, the postnup, the custody agreement, the trusts, the confession, by 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, then this hard drive and my copy of the confession will be delivered by courier to the U.S. Attorney's office. They will prosecute you with a case gift-wrapped by your wife. You'll likely get a reduced sentence for your cooperation. You might even be out in 10 years. She leaned in her eyes, locking onto his. However, if you refuse to sign, if you fight me in any way, then this hard drive will be anonymously leaked to the Wall Street Journal, the SEC, and every major investor in Montgomery Global. The stock will hit 0 before the opening bell. Your partners will be ruined. The government will still come for you, but they won't be in a mood to offer you a deal, and you will have class action lawsuits from every shareholder you've defrauded. You will be buried so deep in litigation, you'll never see the light of day again. And you will have lost the single most valuable thing you could have possibly salvaged from this wreckage, a clean future for your child. It was checkmate. He had two options, and both led to his ruin. But one path offered a future for the Montgomery name and fortune, firewalled away from his crimes in the hands of his child. The other was a scorched earth apocalypse from which nothing would survive. Tears welled in Harrison's eyes, not of remorse, but of utter, absolute defeat. The titan of industry, the master of the universe, was broken. He looked from the hard drive to the folder, and then at the cool, implacable face of the woman he had betrayed. The woman who had been 10 steps ahead of him the entire time. Slowly, his hand trembling, he reached for the pen that Audrey had so thoughtfully placed on top of the folder. He was no longer the Harrison Montgomery, who commanded boardrooms and built empires. He was just a man signing away his life, brought down not by a federal agency or a corporate rival, but by the wife he had so grievously underestimated. The architect had finished her work. The demolition was complete. The silence that followed Harrison's capitulation was heavier than any argument ever had been. The only sound in the vast living room was the scratch of a Mont Blanc pen against thick, watermarked paper. Harrison sat hunched over the coffee table, a king signing away his kingdom under the unflinching gaze of his queen. He didn't read the documents. His lawyer, Arthur Finch, had been summoned and had arrived looking pale and funereal. He'd read them, his face growing grimmer with each clause, but he could offer no counsel. The situation was absolute. There was no loophole, no counteroffer, no strategy left to deploy. There was only the hard drive on the table and the abyss it represented. Audrey stood by the window, her back to him, watching the first hint of dawn streak the sky in shades of grey and bruised violet. She did not watch him sign. It was not a moment of triumph she needed to savour, but a grim necessity. The final messy task of demolition before reconstruction could begin. She felt a strange detachment, as if she were a project manager, overseeing a complex transaction rather than a wife dismantling her own life. The rage had burned itself out, leaving behind a clear, cold, and quiet space. One by one, he signed the post-nuptial agreement, the irrevocable trust documents for their child, the transfer of the deed to the townhouse, the termination of his parental rights. Finally, the confession. When he pushed the last paper away, the pen fell from his trembling fingers and rolled onto the expensive rug, a final small surrender. Arthur Finch, his face a mask of professional duty, gathered the documents, his movements stiff. "Audrey," he said, avoiding the title of Mrs. Montgomery, "everything appears to be in order. The wire transfers for the trust will be initiated by my office at 8 a.m. They will be completed by noon." "Thank you, Arthur," Audrey said, turning to face them. Her gaze fell on Harrison. He looked hollowed out, a ghost in a $1,000 suit. The charisma and power that had once electrified rooms were gone, replaced by the vacant stare of a man who had lost his future. "Is there anything else?" he asked, his voice a rasp. It wasn't a question of negotiation, but the plea of a condemned man asking if the execution was over. "Your personal effects," Audrey said, her tone level. "The staff have been instructed to pack your closets. They will be delivered to a location of your choosing. You have 1 hour. She did not want a protracted, painful departure. She wanted a clean cut. He nodded numbly, then rose to his feet and walked not toward the grand staircase to their master suite, but towards the door. "I won't need anything," he said without turning around. "There's nothing here for me." He walked out the door, closing it softly behind him. The sound echoed the finality of a coffin lid shutting. Audrey stood alone in the center of her reclaimed territory, the silence her first taste of freedom. By mid-morning, Beatrice Shaw arrived. She swept into the townhouse, her practical leather briefcase a stark contrast to the opulence around her. She found Audrey not in the formal living room, but in the sun-filled space designated to become the nursery, sketching on a large pad of paper. Beatrice reviewed the signed documents and the confirmation of the wire transfers from Arthur Finch's office. She gave a single satisfied nod. "It's done," she said. "Clean, irrevocable. The assets are secured in trust, untouchable by him, his creditors, or the United States government. Your child's future is guaranteed." "And?" Harrison Audrey asked, shading in the outline of a window seat on her sketch. "He confessed to his board this morning. The fallout is biblical. The stock is halted. The SEC has formally launched its investigation, and several board members have already retained criminal counsel. He used your copy of his confession to get ahead of the leak. He's trying to control the narrative of his own downfall. It won't save him, but it might reduce his sentence as you predicted." "Good," Audrey said simply. It wasn't said with malice, but with a sense of closure. His fate was his own making. There was one last piece of business. "What about Sloane Hatcher?" Audrey asked, looking up from her drawing. Beatrice's expression was shrewd. "She's in a hotel under a new name, paid for by my office. She's shaken, but she's a survivor. She's already asked about a deal in exchange for her testimony." "What do you want to do with her?" Audrey thought for a moment. She could let Sloane be consumed by the federal investigation, another piece of collateral damage in Harrison's war. Or she could do something else. Harrison's method was to use people and discard them. She would not be him. "She has nothing more to offer us," Audrey said. "The hard drive gave us all the leverage we needed. But she was a catalyst. In a way, her greed and ambition handed me the keys to my own freedom." She looked at Beatrice. "Arrange a settlement for her, enough to start a new life somewhere far from New York. Have her sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. I don't want to hear the names Sabrina Hatcher or Sloane Harrison ever again. Let her disappear." Beatrice raised an eyebrow, a flicker of admiration in her eyes. It was a move of supreme power, not revenge, but dismissal. Audrey wasn't just winning the war. She was rewriting the terms of peace for everyone involved, demonstrating a capacity for pragmatic mercy Harrison never possessed. "Consider it done," Beatrice said. "Audrey, you've handled this with a fortitude I rarely see. What will you do now?" Audrey looked around the empty room, her hand resting on her stomach, where the faintest swell was beginning to show. "For 5 years, I was Mrs. Montgomery. I designed homes for him. I curated a life for him. Now, I think I'll get back to my own work, starting with this room." After Beatrice left, Audrey walked through the cavernous townhouse. It was no longer a cage, but a canvas. The ghosts of her old life were already fading. The staff, who had served Harrison with fearful deference, now looked at her with a quiet, profound respect. She was not just the lady of the house. She was its foundation. Later that afternoon, she had another ultrasound appointment. This time, she didn't go alone. Her best friend, Penelope Grant, a sharp-witted gallery owner she had known since college, was by her side, her hand squeezing Audrey's reassuringly. In the now familiar room, which no longer felt cold, Audrey watched the screen. And there it was, a tiny flickering heartbeat. Strong, persistent, a life separate from all the chaos and deceit, a promise of a future she would build herself. Tears welled in her eyes, but these were not tears of grief or rage. They were tears of profound, overwhelming love and relief. As she and Penelope left the clinic, the city sunlight felt warm on her face. Her phone buzzed. It was a news alert. Harrison Montgomery, CEO of Montgomery Global, resigns amidst massive fraud scandal. She glanced at it, then deleted the notification without a second thought. That was a story from another lifetime. Her story was just beginning. She wasn't a Davenport by birth and a Montgomery by marriage anymore. She was building her own dynasty, a legacy of one, soon to be two. And it would be built not on lies and shifting foundations, but on unbreakable strength and the enduring promise of a new dawn. In the end, Audrey Davenport didn't just survive the wreckage of her marriage. She rose from it, stronger and more in command of her destiny than ever before. She walked away, not as a victim of a millionaire husband's betrayal, but as the architect of her own salvation. She proved that the deepest betrayals can sometimes forge the strongest resolve. Her story isn't just about a cheating husband and a secret penthouse. It's a testament to the power of a woman who, when pushed to the brink, refused to crumble, and instead chose to rebuild her world on her own terms, securing a safe and prosperous future for the one person who truly mattered, her child. What did you think of Audrey's incredible story of strength and strategy? Could you have played the long game like she did? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you were captivated by this tale of drama and twists, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that will leave you speechless.